Rome whispered his name in fear. The gladiator who survived 100 battles now walked freely among the nobility, his scarred hands managing the affairs of the widowed Lady Aurelia. Servants eyed his every move, convinced the man who once killed for sport would soon empty their mistress's coffers. Patricians sneered behind marble columns, counting the days until the barbarian revealed his true nature. But Lady Aurelia saw something different when she looked at Kaeso. Dignity where others saw danger, wisdom where others expected savagery. As the summer heat baked the cobblestones, the whispers grew louder. A priceless family heirloom had vanished from the senator's villa next door. Could a man truly change his nature, or would the arena's shadow forever darken his path? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The silver stylus moved gracefully across the wax tablet as Lady Aurelia Valeria Messala calculated the month's expenses. She paused, tapping the instrument against her lower lip, a habit from childhood that her father had found endearing and her late husband irritating. The summer sun streamed through the atrium, warming the marble floor where her steward, Marcus, shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "My lady, with respect, these matters are not suitable for a woman's mind," Marcus said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining deference. "Perhaps if you allowed me to. I've managed these accounts since my husband's passing," Aurelia replied without looking up. 3 years now. The estate still stands." "Barely," Marcus muttered, then bowed his head as Aurelia's eyes flashed up at him. At 32, Aurelia was neither young bride nor aged matron. The daughter of a respected senator, widow of an unremarkable merchant, she occupied an unusual position in Roman society. Too well-connected to dismiss, too independent to admire. Her dark hair was arranged simply, her stola of good quality but lacking ostentation. Only her eyes, keen and observant, betrayed her father's intelligence and her own determination. She returned to the ledger, unable to dispute Marcus's assessment. The truth lay in the columns before her. Vineyards neglected during her husband's final illness now produced half their potential yield, and creditors circled like vultures. Without a man to represent her interests in the forum, business connections had withered. "My lady," Marcus tried again, "your cousin Titus has offered again to take everything my father built and sell it piece by piece," Aurelia finished. "No, there must be another way." "The way is remarriage," Marcus said bluntly. "Senator Claudius's son has expressed interest." "Lucius Claudius is 19, Aurelia said dryly. "I changed his swaddling cloths." A shadow darkened the doorway. "My lady," said a slave girl, bowing. "Senator Claudius requests an audience." Aurelia quickly covered the ledger with a cloth. "Bring refreshments to the garden." "And Marcus?" She fixed him with a stern look. "Not a word of our finances." Senator Publius Claudius had been her father's closest friend and her most steadfast ally since his death. Age had bent his back but not his wit. He kissed Aurelia's cheek affectionately before settling onto a stone bench beneath a fig tree. "You look like him when you're worried," Claudius said, studying her face. "Your father could never hide his concerns either." "These are difficult times," Aurelia allowed. "More difficult than you admit to an old man." He accepted a cup of watered wine. "The rumors have reached the Senate." "Which rumors? That I've turned wild? That I entertain men unchaperoned?" She smiled tightly. "Or simply that I've ruined my husband's estate through female incompetence? That you need a steward?" Claudius held up a hand as she began to protest. "Not just any steward. Someone who can command respect when representing your interests. Someone who knows agriculture and commerce. Someone who can protect you. I have Marcus." "Marcus is a house slave who knows dinners and decorations. You need someone who understands the world of men." He leaned forward. "I've found someone." Aurelia's spine stiffened. "Another husband candidate? A freedman, educated, experienced in estate management." "A freedman? That would hardly improve my standing." Claudius's eyes twinkled. "Perhaps. But before his manumission, he was known by another name. He lowered his voice. The leopard of Capua. Aurelia nearly spilled her wine. The gladiator? You can't be serious. Kaeso. Yes, once the champion of the arena. Now seeking honest work away from Rome's spectacles. You suggest I hire a man who killed for entertainment? I suggest you hire a man no one will dare to cheat or threaten. Claudius set down his cup. He arrives tomorrow. Just meet him. After Claudius departed, Aurelia returned to her ledger, her mind troubled. The stylus felt heavy in her hand as she uncovered the harsh truth of numbers that wouldn't balance. Outside her window, Rome continued its business. The shouts of vendors, the rumble of carts, the endless gossip, all indifferent to the slow collapse of one woman's world. She thought of her father, who had taught her to read and calculate when other senators' daughters learned only weaving and wifely obedience. Knowledge is freedom, he had said. Now she wondered if knowledge was merely the awareness of one's own imprisonment. The silver stylus hovered over the wax. Tomorrow, a gladiator would stand where Marcus now stood. A man who had fought for his life while crowds cheered for blood. What choice did she have? Morning arrived with the clatter of the household awakening. Water being drawn, bread baking, slaves calling to one another across the atrium. Aurelia had slept poorly, her dreams populated by faceless men in gladiatorial armor. She dressed simply but ensured her hair was impeccably arranged. A small assertion of authority before meeting the man Senator Claudius had recommended. Marcus appeared at her door, his expression sour. He's here. You disapprove, Aurelia observed. It's not my place to approve or disapprove, Domina. Since when has that stopped you? A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. Marcus sniffed. He waits in the atrium. The slaves are unsettled. Aurelia squared her shoulders and followed Marcus. She had expected someone enormous, perhaps covered in battle scars, with the crude manners of the arena. The man who rose at her entrance was indeed tall, but lean rather than massive. His tunic was plain but clean, his posture straight as a soldier's. Close-cropped dark hair showed touches of gray at the temples, and his face bore the weathered look of someone who had lived outdoors. A thin scar traced from his right temple to jawline, but otherwise his appearance was unremarkable. Then he looked up, and Aurelia understood why people had paid to watch him fight. His eyes were amber, almost golden, with an intensity that made her momentarily forget her prepared questions. Lady Aurelia Valeria Messala, Marcus announced with unnecessary formality. The man bowed correctly, neither too deep nor too shallow. Kaeso Attilius, at your service. His voice surprised her, quiet, educated, without the rough accent of the provinces or the affected tones of a social climber. Senator Claudius speaks highly of your capabilities, she said, taking a seat and gesturing for him to do the same. But he was vague about your experience with estate management. I was born on a farm in Campania, Kaeso replied. Before the arena, I worked my family's lands. After manumission, I served 5 years as understeward to Lucius Varenus, overseeing his vineyards and olive groves. Why leave his service? Something flickered across Kaeso's face. People recognized me. It brought unwanted attention to his household. As it would to mine, Aurelia noted. Yes, that's why I sought placement outside Rome. He met her gaze directly. I won't pretend my past isn't problematic, Domina, but the skills that kept me alive serve well in business too. Assessing risks, negotiating from strength, remaining calm under pressure. Aurelia studied him. How many men have you killed? The question hung in the air. Household slaves paused in their tasks, listening. 17, he answered without hesitation. All in the arena. All with honor according to the rules of combat. And since gaining your freedom? None. His hand moved unconsciously to his belt, where she noticed a small wooden token hung from a leather cord. I swore an oath. What is that? She asked, nodding toward the token. Kaeso hesitated before untying it and placing it on the table between them. It was a simple disc of wood, one side darkened with age, the other carved with a crude leopard. The day I won my freedom, a boy gave me this. His father had carried it to vote for my life in my final match. His fingers rested briefly on the token. A reminder of mercy freely given. Something in his manner, the absence of boasting or false humility, convinced Aurelia more than his words. She rose and walked to a side table where the estate ledger lay. My vineyard produces half what it should. 3 creditors demand payment by autumn harvest. My cousin schemes to force me to sell. Can you solve these problems without resorting to violence or dishonesty? I can, Kaeso said simply. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't yet. Trust must be earned. He stood, towering over her but keeping a respectful distance. Give me 1 month. If I haven't improved your situation by then, I'll leave without payment. Aurelia made her decision. Marcus will show you the estate. You'll report directly to me daily. The household answers to Marcus in domestic matters, to you in business affairs. She fixed him with a stern look. Prove Senator Claudius right. Prove everyone else wrong. After Kaeso departed with Marcus, Aurelia remained in the atrium, fingers tracing the rough wooden token he had forgotten on the table. A gladiator's token of life, now in her hands. An omen, perhaps, but of what she couldn't say. Dawn had barely broken when Aurelia heard voices in the vineyard below her window. She wrapped a light stola around her shoulders and stepped onto the balcony that overlooked the sloping hills of her estate. In the misty morning light, she could make out Kaeso's tall figure moving among the vines, followed by a cluster of reluctant field slaves. The previous steward had you pruning in autumn, she heard him say, his voice carrying in the still morning air. But these vines need summer pruning as well. See how the leaves block the sun from reaching the fruit. An older slave named Davos, who had worked the vineyard since Aurelia's father's time, stepped forward. We've always done it this way. The vines produce enough. Enough to keep the estate afloat, enough to pay your food and shelter. Kaeso's tone remained even. Lady Aurelia deserves better than enough. Davos crossed his arms. And what does a man of the arena know about growing things? Your expertise is in cutting down, not nurturing up. The other slaves tensed, expecting violence at the insubordination. Instead, Kaeso reached into his belt and pulled out a small, curved knife with a worn wooden handle. He held it up, letting the rising sun glint off its edge. This pruning knife belonged to my father. Before I ever held a gladius, I held this. He turned to a nearby vine and demonstrated a precise cut. Too much here weakens the whole plant. The vine spends energy on leaves and shoots that bear no fruit. He made several more cuts, then offered the knife to Davos. Like many things, knowing where to cut and where to leave alone makes the difference between thriving and merely surviving. Aurelia watched as Davos hesitantly took the knife, examining Kaeso's work. The old slave made a tentative cut, then another with more confidence. Good, Kaeso said. Now teach the others. I'll return at midday to check your progress. As he turned to leave, he glanced up and saw Aurelia on the balcony. He bowed slightly, and she nodded in acknowledgement before withdrawing. Something about the exchange troubled her. Not his handling of the situation, which had been masterful, but her own reaction to it. There had been something compelling about watching him teach rather than command, respect rather than demand. Later that morning, she found him in the small room she had designated as his office, bent over lists of supplies and accounts. You're up early, she observed. Old habits, he replied, standing. In the Ludus we trained before dawn. On my father's farm we worked with the sun. And which are you doing here? Training or working? A faint smile touched his lips. Both, perhaps. The vineyard has potential, but the soil needs attention. The irrigation channels are silted. And your wine storage methods are... He hesitated. Primitive, she supplied. Traditional, he amended diplomatically. There are techniques from Hispania that could improve the quality. Better wine commands higher prices. Higher expenses too, I imagine. Initially, yes, but the investment would return threefold by next harvest. He showed her his calculations, and Aurelia was impressed by their precision. "You write well," she noted. "A Greek physician in the Ludus taught me. He said education was freedom within captivity." Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus, who entered with barely concealed disdain. "A messenger from your cousin Titus, Domina." Aurelia read the message tablet with growing irritation. "He invites me to discuss terms favorable to all parties regarding the estate, as if it were already his to dispose of. He's tested your defenses and found them wanting," Kaeso observed. "Now he offers terms before launching a full assault. You make my cousin sound like a military commander. All men of wealth are strategists, Domina. The forum is their battlefield." Aurelia considered this. "What would you advise?" "Meet him. Listen. Reveal nothing about our improvements." Kaeso's eyes gleamed with something that might have been amusement. "Let him believe victory is certain. Overconfidence breeds mistakes." "You suggest I dissemble? Play the helpless widow. I suggest you use the role society has given you as an advantage, as I once used the expectations of the arena." Aurelia realized he had been doing the same with the vineyard slaves, using their expectations of a violent gladiator to surprise them with knowledge and restraint. The pruning knife was both tool and symbol, representing his unexpected skill at nurturing growth. "Very well," she said. "I'll receive Titus tomorrow, but I want you nearby." "As you wish, Domina." Kaeso bowed, and as he straightened, Aurelia caught a glimpse of the gladiator he had been. Calculating, watchful, ready to exploit any weakness. For the first time, she was glad to have him on her side of the gate. Titus Valerius Messala arrived precisely at the hour of his appointment, impeccably dressed in a toga whose quality subtly outshone the furnishings of Aurelia's receiving room. A man of 40 with thinning hair and the soft hands of one who had never labored. He kissed his cousin's cheek with practiced affection. "My dear Aurelia, you look well," he said, settling onto a couch. "Though I heard rumors you were unwell. Financially, that is." "Rumors spread faster than truth," Aurelia replied, pouring wine for her guest. "Indeed, the latest being that you've hired a gladiator as your steward." Titus's smile never reached his eyes. "I dismissed it as absurd, of course." "Did you? How disappointing." Aurelia sipped her wine. "He's in the vineyard now, if you'd like an introduction." Titus's composure faltered momentarily. "You can't be serious. A man who killed for sport, managing a senatorial estate? The scandal alone is preferable to bankruptcy." She set down her cup. "You didn't come to discuss my staff, cousin. What terms do you offer?" Recovering quickly, Titus outlined his proposal. He would assume the estate's debts in exchange for immediate control of the vineyard and a third of all future profits. His tone suggested tremendous generosity. "The alternative," he added gently, "is watching your father's legacy crumble completely. No one will deal with a woman alone, Aurelia. It's simply the way of things. And if I refuse, then creditors will take everything, and you'll be dependent on family charity." His smile broadened. "Mine, specifically." The conversation was interrupted by a slave bearing a wax tablet. "From Senator Claudius's house, Domina." Aurelia broke the seal and read the message, aware of Titus's eyes on her. "It seems I'm invited to Senator Claudius's banquet honoring the Praetor Urbanus next week." She looked up. "Will you be attending, cousin?" "Naturally, though I'm surprised at your invitation, given recent choices. Senator Claudius was my father's friend. He takes an interest in my welfare." "As do I," Titus countered. "Consider my offer carefully, cousin. I won't be able to help once the estate is auctioned for debts." After he departed, Aurelia found Kaeso in the vineyard, examining soil samples. She handed him the invitation tablet. "Senator Claudius expects me to bring my steward to this banquet," she said. "It's not a request I can refuse, given his support." Kaeso studied the tablet, his expression unreadable. "This will put you in a difficult position, Domina." "Me? You're the one who will face scrutiny." "I'm accustomed to being stared at," he said dryly. "But your reputation will suffer by association." My reputation is already compromised by remaining unmarried and managing my own affairs. Aurelia watched a line of slaves moving through the vineyard rows. They're pruning more confident now. What concerns me is that every important family in Rome will be present, including potential buyers if the estate fails, Kaeso noted. And your cousin. Yes. Aurelia took back the tablet. This isn't simply a social obligation. It's an opportunity to secure business connections or lose them entirely. Then we must ensure you make the right impression. Kaeso's gaze swept over the vineyard. By then, I can have the first section of vines properly tended. We should bring a sample of last year's best vintage. Playing the merchant at a senatorial banquet? Playing to your strengths, he corrected. Rome respects quality and profit, whatever they claim about noble pursuits. That evening, Aurelia received another visitor. Senator Claudius himself, arriving unannounced as twilight settled over the estate. I wanted to see how your new steward fares, he explained as they walked through the garden. The household is adjusting, Aurelia replied carefully. And you? Are you adjusting to having the leopard of Capua prowling your estate? He prowls less than one might expect. Mostly he calculates and plans. Claudius chuckled. You sound disappointed. Not at all. He's not what I expected. Few people are, when you look beyond their public masks. The senator paused beneath an olive tree. You understand that bringing him to my banquet will cause talk. Everything I do causes talk, Senator. This is different. Many guests lost money betting against him in the arena. Others resent that a slave, even a freed one, could rise above his station. Claudius's voice grew serious. And some simply fear him for what he was. What should I do? Decide if he's worth defending, my dear. Because defend him you must, if you bring him into society. Claudius squeezed her hand. Your father would be proud of your courage. I only hope it doesn't cost you everything he built. After Claudius left, Aurelia stood alone in the gathering darkness, the invitation tablet cool against her palm. One decision, to hire an unusual steward, had led to this moment of choice, with consequences she couldn't fully predict. She had 7 days until the banquet that would either secure her future or destroy it completely. Senator Claudius's villa blazed with light, oil lamps illuminating the columned entrance where guests arrived in litters and chariots. Aurelia wore her finest stola, adorned with a simple gold necklace that had been her mother's. Beside her walked Kaeso, dressed in a new tunic of good quality but deliberately understated. They had agreed he should appear respectable without attempting to mimic the ostentation of the nobility. Remember, Aurelia murmured as they approached the entrance. You're here as my steward, not my protector. Observe more than you speak. As you wish, Domina, Kaeso replied, his face composed in a mask of professional deference. Only the slight tension in his shoulders betrayed his awareness of the stares and whispers that followed them inside. Senator Claudius greeted them warmly, though Aurelia noted the flicker of concern in his eyes. Lady Aurelia, welcome. And this must be the steward I've heard so much about. Kaeso Attilius, Senator. Kaeso bowed respectfully. Your recommendation is an honor I hope to deserve. Well spoken, Claudius replied, visibly relaxing at Kaeso's cultured tone. Come. The praetor Urbanus is eager to meet the widow who manages her own estate so unconventionally. The praetor, Quintus Servilius, was a stern man with calculating eyes and a heavy gold signet ring that he twisted habitually as he spoke. Lady Aurelia, your father was a respected voice in the Senate. He would be surprised by your current arrangements. My father taught me to value results above convention, praetor, Aurelia replied smoothly. My steward has already improved my vineyard's prospects considerably. Indeed, the praetor's gaze shifted to Kaeso. I saw you fight once. Against the Thracian champion, was it not? Yes, praetor. Kaeso's voice revealed nothing of what he might feel at this reminder of his past. A remarkable match. You were clearly outmatched in strength, yet you prevailed through cunning. The praetor studied him. One wonders if similar tactics serve in business matters. In both arenas, Understanding one's true advantages is essential, Kaeso replied. Lady Aurelia's estate offers exceptional soil and southern exposure. Previous management simply failed to maximize these natural benefits. Before the praetor could respond, Titus approached, accompanied by a heavy-set man with an elaborate toga and multiple rings. Cousin, you remember Senator Quintus Fabius? Titus said, his tone falsely cordial. He was just expressing interest in your vineyard's location. For investment purposes only, Senator Quintus added quickly, though his eyes betrayed sharper interest. Prime hillside land is increasingly scarce. A fortuitous coincidence, Titus continued. As I was explaining your financial predicament, Aurelia felt her cheeks warm. My estate is not for sale, Senator Quintus. Though we do have wine available for purchase, should you wish to sample our current vintage. Kaeso smoothly produced a small flask from a pouch at his belt. Our eastern slope produces a particularly fine red. Would you care to taste it, Senator? The diversion worked. Soon, several senators were sampling the wine, with Kaeso answering questions about soil conditions and aging methods. Aurelia watched with growing optimism as business connections formed despite the initial suspicion. A clever stratagem, observed a woman's voice beside her. Aurelia turned to find Livia, the praetor's wife, a formidable woman known for her sharp intelligence and sharper tongue. Using a notorious gladiator to draw attention, then redirecting it to your product, Livia continued. Most women would simply remarry to solve their problems. Most women aren't blessed with problematic estates to manage, Aurelia replied. Livia laughed. I like you, Aurelia Valeria. You have your father's wit. Her expression grew serious. But you play a dangerous game. My husband says your cousin has powerful allies eager to acquire your land. And your steward has enemies from his arena days. I'm aware of the risks. Are you? Look there. Livia nodded toward where Senator Quintus was now speaking animatedly with Kaeso, his jeweled hand gesturing emphatically. Quintus lost a fortune betting against your gladiator in his final match. He doesn't forget such humiliations. The evening progressed through dinner and entertainment. Aurelia navigated the complex social currents while Kaeso maintained a respectful distance, speaking only when addressed. To her surprise, several guests sought his opinion on agricultural matters, grudgingly acknowledging his expertise. As the gathering began to disperse, a commotion erupted near Senator Quintus. My ring! He exclaimed, examining his hand. My signet ring is gone. The heavy gold ring with the Fabius family crest, the one he had been twisting all evening, had vanished. Servants were summoned and questioned. Guests murmured in concern. It must have slipped off, suggested Senator Claudius. Perhaps during dinner? Impossible, Quintus insisted. I would have noticed. It was stolen. His gaze swept the room and settled on Kaeso, standing quietly near Aurelia. You, Quintus said, pointing. The gladiator thief. Where were you when I was speaking with the Macedonian merchant? The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Kaeso and Aurelia. In that moment, she knew the fragile progress of the evening had shattered beyond repair. The journey home from Senator Claudius's villa passed in tense silence. Only when they had entered Aurelia's study, safely beyond the servant's hearing, did she speak. Did you take it? She asked directly, facing Kaeso across the room. No. His response was simple, his golden eyes steady on hers. Aurelia studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I believe you. Relief flickered across his features before his composure returned. Many won't. Senator Quintus lost considerable money betting against you. This accusation conveniently settles that score while reinforcing what everyone already believes, that gladiators are thieves and criminals. She paced the small room. By morning, half of Rome will have heard the story. I could leave, Kaeso offered. Return to Campania. Your reputation might recover if you dismissed me immediately. Running would confirm guilt. Aurelia's voice hardened. And I won't sacrifice an innocent man to preserve appearances. A hint of a smile touched Kaeso's lips. Most Romans would consider a former gladiator expendable. I'm not most Romans. She sat behind her desk, suddenly weary. We need to understand what really happened. Where were you during the banquet? Mostly near the wine display, answering questions about the vintage. Senator Claudius introduced me to several merchants. Then I spoke with Senator Quintus about soil composition. When he still had his ring? Yes. He gestured often as he spoke. Kaeso's brow furrowed in concentration. Afterward, I returned to my position near the entrance. The only time I moved was when a servant dropped a tray, and I helped collect the scattered food. A soft knock interrupted them. Marcus entered, his face unusually solemn. Domina, a messenger from the praetor's office. Urban guards will arrive tomorrow to question the household about the missing ring. After Marcus withdrew, Kaeso spoke quietly. This is now a legal matter. The praetor could order a search of the estate. Let them search. We have nothing to hide. If someone planted the ring here, we would. His expression. Darkened. This feels orchestrated, Domina. Aurelia considered this. My cousin was too pleased by the accusation, and he brought Senator Quintus to our conversation deliberately. A yawn escaped her, and Kaeso noticed her exhaustion. We should continue this discussion tomorrow. You need rest. Wait. Aurelia opened a chest beside her desk and removed a scroll. Since we're facing legal troubles, we should understand our position. She held out the scroll. Do you read Greek? Yes. My teacher in the Ludus was Greek. This is Aristotle. Not the legal text I was seeking, but... She hesitated. Would you care to discuss it sometime? Few in my household can read at all, let alone appreciate philosophy. The request clearly surprised him. I would be honored, Domina. The next morning, Aurelia rose early, her mind clearer after rest. She found Kaeso in the small library, the Greek scroll open before him. He stood when she entered. You've been reading all night? She asked. Philosophy was a luxury in the Ludus. Books remain precious to me. He gestured to the scroll. Aristotle's views on virtue are particularly relevant to our situation. How so? He argues that virtue exists in finding the mean between extremes. Too much courage becomes recklessness. Too little, cowardice. Kaeso rolled the scroll carefully. The virtuous response to our predicament lies somewhere between passive acceptance and rash action. Aurelia was struck by the depth of his understanding. Your Greek teacher taught you well. Demetrius. A shadow crossed Kaeso's face. He died in the arena. His crime was teaching slaves to read. The revelation hung between them, creating a new dimension of understanding. This man had witnessed terrible injustice yet still valued knowledge and reason. Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus, announcing the arrival of the urban guards. The household assembled in the atrium as 4 uniformed men entered, led by a stern centurion. By order of the praetor Urbanus, we are investigating the theft of Senator Quintus Fabius's signet ring, the centurion announced. The freedman Kaeso Attilius is to be questioned. My steward has my full confidence, Aurelia stated firmly, noting how the household slaves watched this exchange with nervous attention. He will cooperate fully, as will I. The centurion looked surprised at her support. Lady Aurelia, you should know that harboring a thief is a serious offense, yes, so is falsely accusing a Roman citizen. She emphasized the last words deliberately. My steward's manumission is legal and complete. He has the same rights as any citizen. As the guards led Kaeso to a side room for questioning, Aurelia caught his eye. A moment of silent communication passed between them. She would not abandon him to face this alone. For the first time since her father's death, she felt the stirring of something beyond mere survival. This was a battle worth fighting, not just for her estate but for justice itself. The questioning lasted 3 hours. Aurelia paced her study until Kaeso returned, his face impassive but weariness evident in the set of his shoulders. They were thorough, he said simply. Did they believe you? The centurion might have. The others? He shrugged. They've decided what I am based on what I was. What happens next? They'll question others who attended the banquet. Search for the ring. Kaeso leaned against the wall, a rare display of fatigue. Without evidence, they can't arrest me, but suspicion alone can be damaging. Then we need to find evidence of your innocence, Aurelia said decisively. I'm going to the forum to speak with my banker, Lucius Caecilius. He may have heard rumors about who stands to gain from this situation. Kaeso straightened. I should accompany you. No, your presence would only fuel gossip. Besides, I need you to investigate here. She lowered her voice. Question the slaves who served at the banquet. Someone must have seen something. As Aurelia departed for the forum, Kaeso began his quiet investigation. Most household slaves avoided him, but Davos, the vineyard overseer, proved unexpectedly helpful. My cousin serves in Senator Quintus's household, Davos revealed as they walked between the vines. He says the senator has been meeting privately with your mistress's cousin Titus. When? Several times in the past month. Always without witnesses. Davos bent to examine a vine. These new pruning methods are working. The fruit sets better. Kaeso recognized the deliberate change of subject. You're risking much by telling me this. Davos straightened, his weathered face serious. The Domina's father was fair to me. She deserves the same fairness. He hesitated. There's more. My cousin says Senator Quintus has money troubles. Gambling debts. At the forum, Aurelia found her banker Lucius reviewing accounts in his small office. After pleasantries, she came directly to the point. Has anyone inquired about my debts recently? Lucius looked uncomfortable. Lady Aurelia, such information is confidential. Lucius, my father trusted you with our family finances for 20 years. I need the truth. The banker sighed. Your cousin Titus has been active. He's purchased several of your outstanding debts from other creditors. Which ones? Lucius produced a tablet from a locked chest. The loan against your southern fields. The renovation debt from your husband's time. And most recently, the note held by the Alexandrian grain merchant. Aurelia felt her stomach tighten. He's consolidating my debts to force repayment all at once. It appears so. Lucius looked genuinely regretful. He's been discreet, using intermediaries for most transactions. I only recognized the pattern last week. Who else is involved? Lucius hesitated. There's been talk of a partnership. Titus lacks sufficient capital for such large purchases. A partnership with whom? I can't say with certainty. The banker lowered his voice. But Senator Quintus Fabius has been seen at the money changers' tables more frequently than usual. Aurelia left the forum with a heavy heart, the pieces falling into place. Her cousin and Senator Quintus were working together, one providing political influence, the other financial leverage. The missing ring accusation was likely part of their scheme to discredit Kaeso and, by extension, her management of the estate. Returning home, she found Kaeso in the vineyard, deep in conversation with a merchant examining their irrigation system. When the man departed, she shared her discoveries. Your investigation confirms mine, Kaeso said grimly. According to Davos, Senator Quintus and your cousin have met secretly several times. They're trying to force me to sell. Aurelia unrolled a property deed she had retrieved from her banker. This lists all the debts Titus now controls. If demanded simultaneously, they would bankrupt me. Kaeso studied the document. The strategy is clear, but their haste suggests weakness. Senator Quintus has gambling debts. He needs your land quickly, perhaps to settle accounts. My father once said desperate men make the most dangerous enemies, and the most careless ones. Kaeso rolled up the deed. We should use that. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the vineyard, they walked together between rows of vines heavy with ripening fruit. Where once there had been neglect, now there was order and promise, a visible testament to Kaeso's work. The harvest will be better this year, Aurelia observed. Not enough to clear all debts, but a beginning. If we're allowed to complete it, Kaeso replied. This accusation is only their opening move. Then we'll counter it. Aurelia stopped, turning to face him. My father taught me that in politics and war, the true battle is fought before the first sword is drawn, in preparation, in alliances, in knowing one's enemy. Wise counsel. Kaeso's golden eyes held hers. But we face enemies with power and position, while we have only truth on our side. Then truth must be our weapon, Aurelia said, her voice gaining strength. And unlike Senator Quintus's missing ring, it's one they cannot take from us. Dawn mist still clung to the garden when Aurelia was awakened by the sound of rhythmic movement outside. Wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, she followed the noise to a small courtyard where olive trees provided privacy from neighboring villas. There she discovered Kaeso, bare-chested in the cool morning air, moving through a series of disciplined combat forms with a wooden practice sword. She remained silent, observing his precise movements, neither frantic nor showy, but efficient and controlled. Each strike flowed into the next defense, his body remembering patterns that had once meant survival. A thin scar traced across his back, disappearing around his ribs. Another marked his shoulder, maps of pain etched into flesh. A twig snapped beneath her foot, and Kaeso whirled, the wooden sword instantly at guard position. Recognition dawned immediately, and he lowered the weapon, reaching for his discarded tunic. "Forgive me, Domina," he said, slightly breathless. "I didn't mean to disturb your morning." "You maintain your skills," Aurelia observed. Neither accusation nor question. "Old habits." He pulled the tunic over his head. "The body forgets if not reminded. Do you miss it? The arena?" The question hung between them, more intimate than she had intended. Kaeso's expression grew distant. "I miss the clarity," he finally answered. "In the arena, there is only survival or death. Outside," he gestured vaguely, "the world is more complex. And yet you read philosophy." A faint smile touched his lips. "Perhaps to understand that complexity." Aurelia approached, picking up the wooden sword. It was worn smooth by years of use, the handle darkened by sweat and oil. "You kept this from your gladiator days?" "No. I carved it here from an olive branch. I couldn't sleep." His golden eyes met hers. "The investigation weighs on me." The simple admission of vulnerability surprised her. "You're concerned about the outcome?" "I'm concerned about you." His directness was startling. "If I'm found guilty, your judgment in hiring me will be questioned. Your enemies will use it against you. Then we must ensure you're not found guilty." She handed him back the practice sword. "Who would want to frame you specifically, beyond the obvious financial motives?" Kaeso was silent for a moment, weighing his words. "In the arena, I defeated many men. Some died. Others lived with the shame of defeat. And their families might seek revenge? Some. But more concerning are the Lanisti, the gladiator trainers who lost fortunes betting against me in my final matches." He turned the wooden sword in his hands. "One in particular, Severus, threatened to see me in chains again after my manumission. Could he be connected to Senator Quintus? Possibly. Gambling creates strange alliances." Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus, who approached with poorly concealed disapproval at finding them alone together at such an early hour. "A message from Senator Claudius, Domina," he announced, presenting a sealed tablet. The message was brief but alarming. Rumors spread quickly. "The praetor has scheduled a formal hearing. Be prepared." As Aurelia shared the news, Kaeso's expression hardened. A public hearing means they're confident of their case, or desperate to resolve it quickly. Aurelia tucked the tablet into her belt. "Either way, we need allies. I'll visit Livia, the praetor's wife. She seemed sympathetic at the banquet. A dangerous gambit. If she sides with her husband, then we're no worse off than before." Aurelia studied him. "Meanwhile, I want you to visit the ludus where you trained. Someone there might know of connections between Severus and Senator Quintus." Kaeso's face darkened. "Returning to the ludus would be difficult. I wouldn't ask if there were another way." Their eyes held for a long moment before he nodded. As you wish, Domina. That afternoon, as Aurelia prepared to depart for Livia's villa, she found Kaeso in the stables, already mounted on a plain brown horse. The Ludus master may not speak freely if I arrive as your representative, he explained. I'll go as a common freedman visiting old acquaintances. Aurelia nodded her understanding. Be careful. You have enemies in that world. And friends, perhaps. He hesitated. There's something you should know in case. He pulled a small pouch from his tunic and handed it to her. Inside was a handful of arena sand, still tinged faintly with old blood. From my final match, he said quietly. When the crowd voted for my freedom. I keep it to remember that men can change, and mercy exists even in the cruelest places. The intimacy of the gesture, sharing something so personal, left Aurelia momentarily speechless. Before she could respond, Kaeso had turned his horse toward the city gates. She watched him go, the small pouch of sand warm in her palm. It was a strange gift, yet somehow perfect in its honesty. Like the man himself, forged in violence but striving for something more. Closing her fingers around the pouch, Aurelia made a silent promise. Whatever came from this day's investigations, she would not abandon him to face it alone. Livia's villa on the Palatine Hill offered a commanding view of the Forum Romanum. The praetor's wife received Aurelia in a private garden where fragrant herbs and careful landscaping created an atmosphere of cultivated tranquility. A bold visit, Livia observed, pouring wine without waiting for a servant. Considering your steward stands accused of theft. Bold circumstances require bold actions, Aurelia replied, accepting the cup. Indeed, Livia settled onto a marble bench. Half of Rome discusses your situation. Most wonder why you defend a gladiator so vigorously. Because he's innocent. A quaint consideration in Roman justice. Livia's tone was sardonic. My husband believes evidence matters more than truth. Then I seek evidence, Aurelia said. Senator Quintus and my cousin Titus have been conspiring against me. The missing ring provides a convenient pretext to discredit my steward and, by extension, my management of the estate. Livia studied her thoughtfully. You've developed a strategic mind. Your father would approve. She sipped her wine. What do you want from me? Information. Insight into your husband's thinking. Perhaps influence. Dangerous things to request. Livia set down her cup. But not impossible. My husband respects procedure above all. If you can introduce doubt about the accusation, he'll feel obligated to investigate further. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger in the praetor's colors. He bowed to Livia, casting a suspicious glance at Aurelia. Urgent news for the praetor's wife, he announced, presenting a sealed tablet. Livia broke the seal and read quickly, her expression giving nothing away. After dismissing the messenger, she turned to Aurelia with uncharacteristic gravity. It seems your defense of the gladiator may have been misplaced, she said, handing over the tablet. This was discovered hidden among the possessions of a known thief arrested this morning in the Subura district. The tablet contained a letter written in a firm, educated hand. To Brutus, the widow's estate yields more wealth than expected. Her father's collection includes Etruscan artifacts easily transported and sold. The southern storeroom remains unguarded during evening meals. Once I gain her full confidence, we move. Be ready with transport after the Ides. Remember our arrangement, equal shares after expenses. Burn this dake. Aurelia felt the blood drain from her face. This is a forgery. Kaeso would never. It bears a reasonable approximation of his signature, Livia interrupted. The urban guards are comparing it to documents he signed as your steward. Anyone could have written this. Aurelia insisted, her mind racing. It's too convenient. Convenient for whom? The thief caught with it has no known connection to Senator Quintus or your cousin. Livia's expression softened slightly. Aurelia, consider the possibility that you've been deceived. Many gladiators master the art of gaining trust before betrayal. Not Kaeso. You seem very certain. Livia studied her with new interest. Your feelings for this man extend beyond employer and steward. My feelings are irrelevant. The facts matter. Aurelia stood, her decision made. Thank you for sharing this with me. I must return home immediately. As her litter carried her through Rome's crowded streets, Aurelia studied the letter, searching for inconsistencies. The handwriting resembled Kaeso's. She had seen enough of his notations in the estate ledgers to recognize the similarity. But something felt wrong. The phrasing, perhaps, or the signature, which lacked the distinctive flourish she had noticed in his official documents. Meanwhile, across the city, Kaeso stood before the imposing entrance of the Ludus Magnus, the largest gladiatorial training school in Rome. The familiar sounds and smells assaulted his senses. Sweat and blood, the clash of practice weapons, the shouts of trainers driving men to their limits. He had spent 8 years in such a place, learning to kill or be killed for the entertainment of Rome. A burly doorkeeper recognized him immediately. The leopard returns to his cage? Bold move. I seek information, not trouble, Kaeso replied. Information costs, especially when Severus still curses your name. Is he here? Gone to Capua. Business with the game's sponsor there. The doorkeeper spat. Lucky for you. He'd have you stabbed in an alley if he knew you were in Rome. What about his associates? Does he still deal with Senator Quintus Fabius? The doorkeeper's eyes narrowed. Asking about senators now? Playing dangerous games for a freedman. I'm involved in a dangerous game regardless, Kaeso countered. Answer my question and I'll make it worth your while. After some negotiation and the exchange of coins, the doorkeeper revealed that Severus and Senator Quintus maintained a close relationship, with the senator frequently attending private gladiator demonstrations at Severus's villa outside Rome. They've got some new scheme brewing, the doorkeeper added. Severus has been recruiting certain types of men, not for arena fighting. Something else. What types of men? Former arena fighters with particular skills. Lockpicking. Forgery. The doorkeeper gave Kaeso a significant look. The kind of men useful for activities best conducted at night. Kaeso left the Ludus with growing certainty about the conspiracy against him, unaware that at that very moment, urban guards were gathering at Aurelia's villa, bearing a warrant for his arrest. Aurelia arrived home to find her villa in chaos. Urban guards were searching every room, overturning furniture and questioning terrified slaves. Marcus hurried to meet her, his usual composure shattered. They have a warrant, Domina, he explained, signed by the praetor himself. On what grounds? Aurelia demanded, though she already knew the answer. Conspiracy to commit theft, answered a stern voice. The centurion from their previous encounter stepped forward. Where is the gladiator? My steward is conducting business in the city, Aurelia replied, fighting to maintain her dignity. What evidence supports these new accusations? The centurion produced a copy of the letter she had already seen at Livia's villa. This document was found in the possession of a known criminal. It details plans to rob your estate, written by your trusted steward. This is clearly a forgery, Aurelia insisted. The handwriting has been compared to his ledger entries. The match is convincing. The centurion seemed almost apologetic. When he returns, he will be taken into custody. As the search continued, Aurelia retreated to her study, mind racing. The forged letter was too perfect a weapon against them. It not only implicated Kaeso but made her appear a fool for trusting him. Whoever created it understood exactly how to drive a wedge between them. A soft knock at the door revealed Davos, the vineyard overseer. Domina, he whispered. I saw him return. He's in the old storage shed by the north vineyard. Thank you, Davos. Aurelia touched his arm in gratitude. Delay the guards if they ask about that area. She slipped out through the kitchen garden, using the olive trees for cover until she reached the dilapidated shed. Kaeso emerged from the shadows as she approached, his expression grim. I heard the commotion, he said. What's happened? Quickly, she explained about the forged letter and the search warrant. They'll arrest you on sight. Then I should leave Rome immediately. No. Aurelia's voice was fierce. That's exactly what they want, to separate us and make you appear guilty. She produced the letter. This forgery is too convenient. Who would benefit most from your disgrace? Severus, Kaeso replied without hesitation. The Ludus doorkeeper confirmed he still works closely with Senator Quintus, and he's been recruiting men with forgery skills. Then we need proof of their conspiracy. Aurelia paced the small shed. Did you learn anything else? Senator Quintus regularly visits Severus's villa outside Rome. They're planning something beyond just discrediting me. Something involving my former arena connections. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching voices. Through a crack in the wooden wall, they saw Titus arriving, accompanied by 2 servants. He spoke briefly with the centurion before heading toward the main house. My cousin appears particularly pleased with himself, Aurelia observed bitterly. He believes he's winning. Kaeso's voice hardened. We should follow him. See what he does while he thinks I'm absent and you're distracted. They watched as Titus dismissed the centurion's offer of assistance and entered the villa alone. Moving carefully to avoid the guards, Aurelia and Kaeso used the servant's entrance to follow him inside. Titus went directly to Aurelia's study and began searching through her desk drawers. Finding them locked, he produced a small iron tool and expertly picked the lock. A skill unexpected in a man of his status. What is he looking for? Aurelia whispered as they observed from the adjoining room. Something specific, Kaeso replied softly. See how methodical he is? Titus finally found what he sought. A small ivory box containing private family documents. As he rifled through them, his belt pouch caught on the desk corner and spilled its contents. Coins scattered across the floor, along with a small brass key. Cursing, Titus quickly gathered the coins but in his haste overlooked the key, which had rolled beneath a cabinet. After replacing the documents and relocking the drawer, he departed with a satisfied expression. Once certain he was gone, Aurelia retrieved the forgotten key. It was ornate, with a distinctive pattern of acanthus leaves on the bow. This is no ordinary house key, she observed, studying it closely. No, Kaeso agreed. It's for a decorative lock, the kind used on valuable document cases or jewelry boxes. Why would my cousin carry such a thing? Aurelia turned the key over in her palm. Unless it belongs to something of Senator Quintus's, Kaeso finished her thought. Perhaps even the case that held his missing ring. The realization dawned simultaneously. If we could prove this key fits Senator Quintus's lockbox, we would have evidence linking your cousin to the theft. Kaeso's golden eyes brightened with new purpose. But we'd need access to the senator's home, which is impossible while you're a fugitive and I'm under suspicion. Aurelia closed her fingers around the key, its weight suddenly representing their first real hope. Unless we have help from someone who can enter the senator's house without raising suspicion, Kaeso suggested. Exactly. Aurelia's mind was already forming a plan. Senator Claudius remains my ally, and his wife regularly visits Quintus's household. If she could confirm the key's purpose, it might be enough to cast doubt on the entire accusation. Kaeso's hand briefly covered hers, warm around the small key. This may be the evidence we need. For the first time since the banquet, Aurelia felt a surge of genuine hope. The key that had fallen from her cousin's pouch might unlock more than a simple box. It could open the path to their vindication. Night fell over the villa, bringing temporary respite as the urban guards retreated to report their findings to the praetor. In the quiet of her bedchamber, Aurelia stood before the wax funeral mask of her father, preserved in a small shrine as Roman tradition dictated. The stern, noble features, molded from her father's face after death, gazed back with empty eyes that nonetheless seemed to hold judgment. "What would you do, father?" she whispered. "Risk everything for justice? Or surrender to preserve what remains of our name?" The mask offered no answer, but as Aurelia touched the worn wax, memories surfaced of her father's unwavering principles. "A Messala does not bow to intimidation," he had often said. "We stand for truth, even when truth stands alone." Her decision crystallized in that moment of remembrance. She would fight, not just for her estate or for Kaeso, but for the principle that justice should not yield to power. With renewed determination, Aurelia summoned those household members she trusted most. Marcus, despite his disapproval of Kaeso, Davos, who had already shown his loyalty, and 3 house slaves who had served the family since her father's time. Kaeso joined them, having remained hidden in the storage shed. "What I ask involves great risk," Aurelia began, her voice low but firm. "The urban guards will return tomorrow. Before then, we must gather evidence to prove that my cousin and Senator Quintus conspired to frame Kaeso." "Dangerous accusations, Domina," Marcus cautioned. "Even if true. More dangerous to do nothing," she countered. "If Kaeso is arrested, the estate will fall to Titus. All of you will be sold to new masters." This stark reality silenced further objections. Aurelia continued, outlining her plan. "Marcus, you will visit Senator Claudius at first light. Ask his wife to examine Senator Quintus's study for a lockbox that might match this key." She held up the brass key from Titus's pouch. "Davos, take 2 trusted men to Severus's villa outside the city. Observe only, note who enters and leaves, especially if my cousin or Senator Quintus appears." "And me, Domina?" asked an elderly Greek slave named Philos, who had once been her father's secretary. "You have the finest eye for handwriting in this household," Aurelia replied. "Compare these 2 documents, Kaeso's legitimate vineyard report and this forged letter. Note every discrepancy, no matter how small." As the others dispersed to prepare, Kaeso remained. "And what of me?" he asked quietly. "You must stay hidden," Aurelia said, though the words pained her. "If captured, you'll have no opportunity to defend yourself. The praetor's decision would be immediate and final. While you risk everything?" His golden eyes held hers. "I cannot hide while you face danger." "You must." She touched his arm briefly. "Your freedom, your life, depends on remaining undiscovered until we have proof." Later, alone in her study, Aurelia drafted messages to influential women of her acquaintance, wives of senators, wealthy, widows, priestesses of important temples. Though women held no official power in Rome, their informal influence often shaped men's decisions. She requested their presence at her home the following afternoon, promising revelations that would touch the honor of every Roman family. A soft knock interrupted her work. To her surprise, it was Marcus, his usual disapproval replaced by troubled uncertainty. "May I speak freely, Domina?" "Always, Marcus. I have served this household since before your birth," he began carefully. "I knew your father as an honorable man. I watched you grow from child to woman. Never did I question your judgment until Kaeso," she finished for him. "Yes." Marcus straightened his shoulders. "I believed hiring a gladiator would bring ruin upon this house. I feared he would corrupt or manipulate you. And now I see a man fighting for principles when he could save himself by fleeing." Marcus's voice softened. "I was wrong to judge him solely by his past." The admission clearly cost him pride, and Aurelia felt a surge of affection for her loyal steward. "Thank you, Marcus. Your support means more than you know." "There is something else." Marcus hesitated. "The household slaves whisper that your feelings for him extend beyond mere justice." Aurelia turned away, unable to meet his concerned gaze. "My feelings are irrelevant to the truth of his innocence. Perhaps, but not irrelevant to your happiness." Marcus bowed slightly. "Your father wanted that above all else, even the family name." After Marcus departed, Aurelia returned to the shrine where her father's mask maintained its eternal vigil. For the first time, she allowed herself to examine her feelings for Kaeso, not as mistress for servant or advocate for accused, but as woman for man. In the still night, with only her father's silent presence as witness, she acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding. Somewhere between suspicion and trust, between professional respect and personal admiration, she had begun to care for him in ways that defied Rome's rigid social boundaries. The realization brought both clarity and complication. Justice remained her primary goal, but now she understood that her heart, too, had joined the battle dawn found Kaeso in the abandoned storage shed, his temporary sanctuary from the urban guards. Sleep had eluded him, his mind consumed with calculating risks and possibilities. He reached into his tunic and withdrew the small pouch of arena sand he always carried. His talisman, his reminder. The grains spilled into his palm, still faintly rusty with ancient blood. 8 years in the Ludus had taught him patience and strategy. When to strike, when to feint, when to endure. Yet nothing had prepared him for this new arena, one where status and political connections mattered more than skill or truth. Nor had anything prepared him for Aurelia. In the arena, emotions were weakness. Fear, anger, hesitation, all paths to death. Gladiators learned to transform such feelings into controlled aggression or to suppress them entirely. Yet since entering Aurelia's household, Kaeso had experienced emotions he scarcely recognized. Gratitude for her trust, admiration for her courage, and something deeper he dared not name. A soft footfall outside interrupted his thoughts. He tensed, hand moving to the knife at his belt, then relaxed as Davos entered with a bundle of food and fresh clothing. "The Domina sends these," the vineyard overseer said. "And news Marcus has gone to Senator Claudius. 2 urban guards remain at the gates, but they seem uninterested in the outbuildings." "Thank you." Kaeso accepted the provisions. "Have you prepared for your journey to Severus's villa?" "We leave within the hour. 2 trusted men will accompany me as apparent wine merchants." Davos hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Visitors arrived this morning. 3 men asking for work in the vineyard. They claim to be peasants from Campania, but their hands have never worked soil." "Describe them." Davos's description confirmed Kaeso's suspicions. "Former gladiators. Probably sent by Severus to ensure I'm captured, or worse. The Domina refused them employment, but they're lingering in the village, watching the estate." After Davos departed, Kaeso considered this new threat. Severus was tightening the net, positioning men to find him if he attempted escape. The gladiator trainer's vendetta was clearly personal, extending beyond mere assistance to Senator Quintus. Memories surfaced of his final years in the Ludus. Severus had been his trainer's chief rival, losing fortunes wagering against Kaeso in match after match. When the crowd finally granted Kaeso his freedom, Severus had been ruined. His gladiators discredited, his gambling debts overwhelming. "You'll never truly be free," he had spat as Kaeso departed the arena for the last time. "Men like you belong in chains." Now Severus sought to fulfill that promise, using Aurelia's vulnerable position as his instrument of revenge. The thought of Aurelia stirred protective instincts Kaeso had thought long buried. In the arena, he had fought only for himself, for survival, for freedom. Now, for the first time, he found himself willing to risk that hard-won freedom for someone else's welfare. A rustling at the door announced another visitor. This time it was Philos, the elderly Greek secretary, carrying writing materials and the documents Aurelia had given him to compare. "The Domina suggested I might work here undisturbed," he explained. "The house has too many curious eyes." They cleared a space on an old table, and Philos began his meticulous examination of the genuine vineyard report and the forged letter. His aged fingers traced each character with scholarly precision. "Interesting," he murmured after some time. "The forgery is skillful but reveals subtle inconsistencies. The pressure of the stylus differs, your hand is firm and consistent, while the forger's varies. And here," he pointed to the signature, "the final stroke curves upward in your authentic writing but downward in the forgery. Enough to prove it false? To a trained eye, yes. To the praetor," Philos shrugged. "Officials see what they expect to see." As the old man continued his analysis, Kaeso paced the small shed, frustration building. Remaining hidden while others took risks on his behalf contradicted everything his life had taught him. In the arena, passive defense inevitably led to defeat. Victory required decisive action. Yet Aurelia had been right. His capture would end any chance of proving the conspiracy. For her sake, he must endure this confinement, this helplessness. A commotion from the direction of the main villa drew his attention. Through a crack in the wooden wall, He saw a group of richly dressed women arriving in litters and chariots. The influential Roman matrons Aurelia had summoned. Among them he recognized Livia, the praetor's wife, her expression guarded but curious. Kaeso felt a surge of admiration for Aurelia's strategy. By involving these powerful women, she created witnesses and potential allies whose husbands and brothers controlled Rome's legal and political systems. It was a bold move, one that would either ensure their victory or complete their downfall. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the vineyard, Kaeso clenched the pouch of arena sand in his fist. Throughout his life, others had determined his fate, first as a farmer's son captured in war, then as a gladiator fighting for others' entertainment. Freedom had meant claiming control of his own destiny. Now, once again, his fate rested in others' hands. But this time, those hands belonged to someone he had come to trust, perhaps even to love, beyond all expectation. The Basilica Julia stood imposing in the morning light, its marble columns casting long shadows across the Forum Romanum. Inside, the urban praetor's court had drawn an unusual crowd. Senators and equestrians mingled with merchants and freedmen, all drawn by rumors of the scandalous case involving a patrician widow and her gladiator steward. Aurelia entered with dignified composure, accompanied by Marcus and an elderly man named Gaius Hortensius, a retired advocate who had been her father's friend. Behind them walked Kaeso, who had surrendered himself to the urban guards that morning after Aurelia convinced him that appearing voluntarily would strengthen their position. The praetor urbanus, Quintus Servilius, sat on an elevated platform, his curule chair symbolizing his authority to judge civil cases. Before him stood a small bronze scales of justice, a traditional emblem of Roman legal proceedings. This court will now hear evidence in the matter of the missing signet ring of Senator Quintus Fabius Maximus, the praetor announced, his voice carrying through the basilica, and the related charges of conspiracy against the freedman Kaeso Attilius. Senator Quintus himself presented the first testimony, his florid face solemn as he recounted the banquet and the disappearance of his valuable ring. "The ring has been in my family for 3 generations," he declared. "Its value is beyond mere gold. It represents the honor of the Fabius name. I noticed its absence only after speaking with the accused." He pointed dramatically at Kaeso, a man whose arena skills included misdirection and sleight of hand. Titus followed, his testimony carefully crafted to appear reluctant. "As Lady Aurelia's cousin, I take no pleasure in these proceedings," he began with false humility. "But I cannot ignore the evidence. Since this gladiator entered my cousin's household, valuables have gone missing. The estate's finances have grown increasingly disordered. I fear he has taken advantage of a vulnerable widow." Aurelia's hands clenched in her lap at the deliberate portrayal of her as weak and incompetent. Hortensius patted her arm reassuringly, whispering, "Let them overreach. Pride comes before the fall." The prosecution's key witness was Lucius, a slave from Senator Quintus's household who claimed to have seen Kaeso handling items on the table where the ring had last been seen. Under questioning, he provided elaborate details about Kaeso's movements during the banquet. "And you're certain the accused touched the senator's possessions?" the prosecutor pressed. "Yes, during the confusion when a servant dropped a tray of food," Lucius answered smoothly. He used the distraction to his advantage. Next came the forged letter, presented by a minor magistrate who oversaw the arrest of the thief found with it. The criminal Brutus was apprehended with this document, which clearly outlines a plan to rob Lady Aurelia's estate, written by her own steward. The letter was passed to the praetor, who examined it before ordering it shown to the defense. Hortensius studied it carefully, his aged eyes narrowing. The prosecution calls the scribe Tiberius, who has compared the handwriting with known documents written by the accused, the prosecutor announced. A thin man with ink-stained fingers approached the praetor's bench, bowing deferentially. "I have examined both the letter and the vineyard records kept by the accused. The hand is the same. Distinctive letter forms, consistent pressure, identical signature flourishes." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aurelia glanced at Kaeso, whose face remained impassive, though she could sense his tension in the rigid set of his shoulders. The prosecution's final witness was Severus himself, the gladiator trainer whose vendetta against Kaeso had helped orchestrate the conspiracy. Tall and scarred, with cold eyes that swept contemptuously over Kaeso, he cut an intimidating figure. "I trained fighters for 20 years, he declared. "I know their nature. Men who survive the arena do so through cunning and opportunism. They learn to identify weakness and exploit it without mercy." He gestured toward Aurelia. The noble lady offered the perfect target: wealthy, isolated, vulnerable. Any gladiator would recognize such an opportunity. "And you have no personal animosity toward the accused?" Hortensius interrupted, rising for his first question of the proceedings. "Why would I?" Severus replied smoothly. "He was merely one of hundreds who passed through the training grounds. Yet you lost a substantial sum wagering against him in his final matches," Hortensius pressed. "Some say it nearly ruined you." A flash of anger crossed Severus's face before he controlled it. "Gambling is common in my profession. Wins and losses are forgotten quickly." As the prosecution concluded its case, the praetor called for a brief recess before the defense would present its arguments. Aurelia, Kaeso, and Hortensius withdrew to a small antechamber to confer. "They've constructed a compelling narrative," Hortensius admitted. "The forged letter is particularly damaging, as it provides motive and intent. But we have Philos's analysis showing inconsistencies in the handwriting," Aurelia reminded him. "Against their court-appointed scribe?" Hortensius shook his head. "We need something more concrete. Evidence that directly links your cousin and Senator Quintus to the conspiracy." "Marcus should have returned from Senator Claudius by now," Kaeso observed, his voice low. "And Davos from Severus's villa." Aurelia touched the hidden pocket in her stola, where she had placed the brass key from Titus's pouch. Everything depended on proving its connection to Senator Quintus's missing ring, and time was running out as the court reconvened. Aurelia noticed Senator Claudius enter with Marcus at his side. The elderly senator nodded slightly to her, a signal that gave her hope. Behind them came Davos, his weathered face tense with urgency. Whatever they had discovered, they had returned just in time. The praetor called for the defense to present its case. Hortensius rose, his aged frame belying the sharpness of his legal mind. "Honored praetor," he began, "the prosecution has presented a narrative built on assumption and circumstance. We intend to show that not only is Kaeso Attilius innocent of these charges, but that he himself is the victim of a deliberate conspiracy." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The praetor leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued by the bold claim. "A serious accusation requires serious evidence," he warned. "Indeed, praetor." Hortensius gestured to their first witness. "We call Philos, secretary to the late Senator Marcus Valerius Messala, Lady Aurelia's father." The elderly Greek approached, carrying the forged letter and Kaeso's authentic vineyard report. With scholarly precision, he detailed the discrepancies between them: pressure variations, inconsistent letter formations, and subtle differences in the signature that only a trained eye would notice. While superficially similar, Philos concluded, these documents were not written by the same hand. The forger was skilled but unfamiliar with certain habits unique to Kaeso's writing. The praetor examined both documents himself, his brow furrowed in concentration. Interesting but not conclusive. The differences could be attributed to haste or different writing conditions. "Then perhaps this will prove more persuasive," Hortensius replied. "We call Senator Publius Claudius." The respected elder statesman approached with dignity. "Praetor Servilius, I come not merely as a witness but as a concerned citizen. What began as a simple theft accusation has revealed a troubling pattern of deception." From within his toga, Senator Claudius produced a sealed document. "This is my personal will, properly witnessed and registered with the Temple of Saturn. In it, I have designated Lady Aurelia Valeria Messala as guardian of certain family artifacts until my son reaches maturity." The revelation caused a stir in the courtroom. Claudius continued, "I mention this because yesterday, my wife discovered a forged version of this document in Senator Quintus's study. one that named Titus Valerius Messala as the designated guardian instead. The praetor's eyes widened. This is a serious allegation against a member of the Senate. One easily verified praetor. The forgery remains in Senator Quintus's document case, a distinctive box of Carthaginian cedar with silver fittings. Senator Claudius turned toward where Titus sat with Senator Quintus, both men now visibly uncomfortable. A box that requires a very particular key. Aurelia stepped forward, producing the brass key from her pocket. This key was dropped by my cousin Titus while searching my study without permission. We believe it opens Senator Quintus's document box. The praetor accepted the key, examining its ornate design. Senator Quintus, is this your key? Quintus paled visibly. I cannot say with certainty. I have several similar keys. A simple test would resolve the question, Hortensius suggested. If the court would send a trusted official to examine Senator Quintus's document box. Before the praetor could respond, Davos requested permission to speak. The vineyard overseer described his observations at Severus's villa the previous day. I witnessed Titus Valerius arrive with a small package, he testified. He argued with Severus about payment for services rendered, and mentioned that the gladiator will be dealt with permanently. When Severus demanded more money, Titus threatened to reveal that he had given Severus the ring as agreed. The courtroom erupted in shocked exclamations. The praetor banged his ceremonial staff for order. These are extraordinary claims that require extraordinary proof. The proof exists, came a new voice. Livia, the praetor's wife, entered the basilica, commanding immediate attention. She approached her husband's bench with regal confidence. My dear, the praetor said, clearly surprised by her appearance. This is most irregular, as is a conspiracy to falsely accuse an innocent man, Livia replied calmly. This morning, I visited Senator Quintus's home to return a borrowed manuscript. While there, I happened to notice a distinctive key on his desk, identical to the one Lady Aurelia has presented. She turned to face the crowd. Curiosity led me to examine the document box it opened. Inside, I found not only the forged will Senator Claudius mentioned, but also this. From a fold in her stola, Livia produced a heavy gold signet ring bearing the crest of the Fabius family. The supposedly stolen ring, hidden in Senator Quintus's own document box. She placed it on the praetor's bench beside the scales of justice. The same box that Titus Valerius has a key to. Complete silence fell over the basilica as the implications became clear. The praetor stared at the ring, then at his wife, then at Senator Quintus and Titus, who had both risen as if to flee. Guards, the praetor commanded, his voice cold with authority. Detain Senator Quintus and Titus Valerius. They will answer for this apparent perjury and conspiracy. He turned to Kaeso. The charges against you are dismissed, Kaeso Attilius. This court offers its apology for your unjust accusation. As the guards moved to apprehend the true conspirators, Titus pointed accusingly at Senator Quintus. It was his idea. He needed money for gambling debts. I only wanted my family's estate returned to proper management. Senator Quintus responded with equal desperation. He approached me, said his cousin had hired a criminal who would disgrace her family name. Their mutual betrayal completed the collapse of their conspiracy. As they were led away, still trading accusations, the scales of justice on the praetor's bench caught the sunlight streaming through the basilica's windows, gleaming as if an affirmation of truth revealed. The praetor's official proclamation of Kaeso's innocence echoed through the Basilica Julia, a formal restoration of honor that carried legal weight throughout Rome. As attendants recorded the judgment on official tablets, Aurelia felt the tension of the past weeks finally begin to ease. Let it be known, the praetor declared, that Kaeso Attilius is cleared of all charges relating to theft and conspiracy. His status as a free citizen of Rome remains untarnished. He looked directly at Kaeso. The court recognizes the injustice you have suffered and grants compensation from the seized property of the conspirators once their trial is complete. Kaeso bowed respectfully. Justice itself is sufficient compensation, praetor. Outside the basilica, well-wishers surrounded them. Senator Claudius embraced Aurelia warmly. "Your father would have been proud of your courage, my dear. Standing for truth against powerful opposition. That's the true Messala spirit." Livia approached with a knowing smile. "A satisfying outcome, wouldn't you agree? Thanks in large part to your intervention," Aurelia acknowledged. "Why did you help us?" "Rome functions on balance, Lady Aurelia. When men like my husband become too certain of their judgments, someone must restore perspective." Livia's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Besides, I found your defense of your steward intriguing. Such loyalty is rare and worth preserving." As they made their way through the forum, Aurelia was struck by the changed attitudes of those they passed. Merchants who had avoided her gaze days earlier now offered congratulations. Senators who had whispered behind their hands now acknowledged her with respectful nods. "Vindication appears good for business," Kaeso observed quietly. "And for one's social standing," Aurelia agreed. "Though I suspect some newfound goodwill is directed at you rather than me." Indeed, several former gladiators approached Kaeso with the distinctive salute of the arena, honoring a brother who had prevailed in yet another life-or-death contest. He returned their gesture with dignified restraint, neither embracing nor rejecting his past. At the villa, the household had prepared a modest celebration. Even Marcus had arranged for special wine to be served. The staff's relief was palpable, not just for Kaeso's exoneration but for the security of their own futures now that the estate would remain under Aurelia's control. As evening approached, Aurelia found Kaeso in his office, reviewing the vineyard records as if the dramatic events of the day were merely a brief interruption to his work. "The eastern slopes are showing excellent progress," he reported, looking up from his tablets. "With proper care, next year's yield could double." "You speak as if nothing has changed," Aurelia said, taking a seat across from him. "Hasn't it?" His golden eyes held hers. "The estate still requires management. The harvest approaches. Life continues. But now without the shadow of accusation." She studied him curiously. "Does freedom from suspicion feel different from freedom from the arena?" "Both required proof of worth," he replied after consideration. "Both were granted by others' judgment." His expression softened slightly. "Though I value your faith in me more than I valued the crowd's mercy." From within her stola, Aurelia withdrew a document case containing parchment bearing official seals. "This arrived from the magistrate's office while you were speaking with your arena brothers." Kaeso accepted the case, opening it carefully. Inside lay formal documentation confirming his exoneration, stamped with the praetor's seal. Tangible proof of his cleared name that would protect him from future accusations. "Freedom papers of a different sort," she observed as he examined the document. "More valuable in some ways," he agreed. "The first granted me freedom of body. These grant freedom of reputation." He rolled the parchment carefully. "I owe you a debt I cannot repay." "You owe me nothing," Aurelia countered. "You've more than earned your position through loyal service." A momentary silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Kaeso spoke with careful formality. "Now that my name is cleared, you should know that several business opportunities have been presented to me today." Senator Claudius mentioned estates needing management. A merchant from Alexandria offered partnership in a shipping venture. Though his tone remained neutral, Aurelia felt a sudden chill. "You're considering leaving? I thought perhaps you might prefer a steward without my complicated history." His eyes remained steady on hers. "Your reputation would recover more fully without daily reminders of this scandal. Is that what you want?" she asked, her voice softer than intended. Before he could answer, Marcus appeared at the doorway. "Forgive the interruption, Domina. Senator Quintus's wife requests an audience. She waits in the atrium." The unexpected visitor postponed their conversation. With a last glance at Kaeso, Aurelia departed to meet with the wife of the man who had nearly destroyed them both, leaving unanswered the question of whether their shared ordeal had forged a bond that transcended master and servant, or if vindication would now lead them to separate paths. Autumn painted the vineyard in amber and gold, the carefully tended vines heavy with ripened fruit. Workers moved methodically through the rows, harvesting grapes that promised the finest vintage in years. Aurelia stood at the edge of the eastern slope, watching as full baskets made their way to the pressing room. For months had passed since the trial. Titus had been exiled to a remote province, his property confiscated. Senator Quintus had escaped similar punishment through his connections but remained disgraced, his political influence shattered. Severus had fled Rome before he could be arrested, reportedly seeking new opportunities in the gladiatorial schools of Capua. More importantly, the estate had flourished under continued careful management. Kaeso's agricultural innovations had yielded exactly the results he predicted, nearly double the previous year's harvest. With the profits, Aurelia had repaid several outstanding debts and invested in improvements to the pressing and storage facilities. She had also invested in people. Davos had been promoted to oversee all agricultural operations. Philos now trained 2 younger slaves in record-keeping and correspondence. Even Marcus had found new purpose coordinating the expanded household with surprising enthusiasm. As for Kaeso, the merchants from Neapolis have agreed to our terms. His voice came from behind her. They'll take the entire southeastern production at premium prices. Aurelia turned to find him approaching along the vineyard path, tablets in hand. Despite his growing responsibilities, he maintained the disciplined physique of his arena days, though his face had softened somewhat, the constant vigilance giving way to measured confidence. That exceeds our projections, she observed, examining the figures he presented. Quality commands its price. There was quiet pride in his voice. The new fermentation techniques proved effective. They walked together through the vineyard, discussing business with the comfortable familiarity of trusted partners. Yet beneath the professional exchange ran an undercurrent that neither had fully acknowledged since that interrupted conversation months earlier. Kaeso had stayed, declining the outside offers without explanation. Aurelia had never pressed him for his reasons, grateful for his continued service yet increasingly aware of the limitations their respective positions imposed. Roman society had gradually accepted their unusual arrangement, particularly as the estate's success became evident. Invitations arrived regularly for Aurelia, often with specific requests that her steward accompany her to discuss agricultural innovations. Business connections flourished. Social connections cautiously redeveloped, and life established a new pattern. Yet something remained unresolved between them, a boundary neither had found the courage to address directly. As they reached the pressing room, Kaeso paused, removing a small package from his belt. I had intended to present this at dinner, but perhaps now is more appropriate. Curious, Aurelia unwrapped the cloth to reveal a beautifully crafted silver clasp shaped like a grapevine, the detailed leaves and fruit catching the afternoon light. From the first silver earned by the vineyard under our management, Kaeso explained, to commemorate what we've accomplished. Aurelia traced the intricate design with her fingertip. It's beautiful. She looked up at him. But you say our management, as if we are equals in this endeavor. Aren't we? He asked quietly. In contribution, if not in title? The question hung between them, laden with implications that extended far beyond vineyard management. Before she could respond, Marcus approached, apologetically interrupting with news of visitors. Merchants from Alexandria seeking contracts for the next season's wine. The business of the estate continued, the moment once again deferred. That evening, after the visitors had departed with promising agreements in place, Aurelia sat alone in her study, the silver vine clasp gleaming in the lamplight. The gift represented more than business success. It acknowledged a partnership that had evolved beyond conventional boundaries, a partnership that Roman society might grudgingly accept in commercial matters but would condemn in personal ones. A patrician woman and a former gladiator. A mistress and her steward. The social gulf seemed unbridgeable. Yet as she fastened the clasp to her stola, Aurelia remembered her father's words. Messalas do not bow to convention when convention defies reason. He had taught her to read and calculate when others thought such education wasted on a daughter. He had encouraged her independence when society demanded compliance. What would he say about the choice she now contemplated? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Kaeso entered at her acknowledgement, carrying the estate ledger for her review. He noticed the silver clasp immediately, a flicker of pleasure crossing his features. "It suits you," he said simply. "Yes," Aurelia agreed, touching the silver vines. "Some things, once properly paired, seem always to have belonged together." Their eyes met, the ledger momentarily forgotten. In that silent exchange lay understanding that some barriers, like the vineyard's neglected soil, could be transformed with sufficient patience and care. That some conventions, like the expectation of Kaeso's criminality, could be proven false through persistent truth. That some relationships defied traditional categories, creating their own definition through shared purpose and mutual respect. Outside, the newly harvested vineyard stood as testament to what they had already accomplished together against considerable odds. What might they yet achieve if they refused to let Rome's social barriers limit what had begun to grow between them? Winter came to Rome, bringing cool rains that nourished the dormant vines and filled the cisterns. The morning sky held the pale clarity unique to Mediterranean winters, a crystalline blue that promised spring's eventual return. In the vineyard, Kaeso walked the familiar paths he had first surveyed nearly a year before. Then, the vines had been neglected, the soil depleted, the entire estate teetering on the edge of ruin. Now, even in their winter dormancy, the neatly pruned rows spoke of care and prosperity. Workers nodded respectfully as he passed, no longer viewing him with suspicion but with the deference due to a man whose knowledge had brought them all security. At the crest of the eastern slope, where the finest grapes grew, he paused. The vista before him encompassed not just Aurelia's estate but neighboring lands as well, including a recently purchased parcel that had once belonged to Senator Quintus. The expansion represented more than business success. It symbolized their triumph over those who had tried to destroy them. He heard soft footsteps on the path behind him and turned to find Aurelia approaching, wrapped in a warm cloak against the winter chill. The silver vine clasp secured her garment at the shoulder, catching the morning light. "The courier brought correspondence from Alexandria," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Our wine received highest praise at the governor's banquet. They've doubled their order for next season." "Good news," Kaeso acknowledged with a slight smile. "Though I suspect you didn't climb the hillside merely to share business matters." "No." Her gaze swept over the vineyard, then returned to meet his. "I came because of the date. Do you remember?" He did. 1 year ago today, he had stood before her in her atrium, a former gladiator seeking honest work, while she had been a widow struggling to maintain her independence. Both had been judged by their pasts rather than their potential, both fighting separate battles against Rome's rigid expectations. "Much has changed," he observed quietly. "And much remains the same," she countered. "Rome still whispers. Society still judges. Does that trouble you?" Aurelia's fingers touched the silver clasp thoughtfully. "Less than it once did. Success provides its own insulation against gossip. And truth, as we discovered, eventually overcomes rumor." From within her cloak, she withdrew a small cloth-wrapped package and handed it to him. Inside, Kaeso found a finely crafted wooden token, similar to the one that had granted him life in the arena, but new, carved from the wood of an olive tree from Aurelia's own garden. On one side was etched a leopard, acknowledging his past. On the other, a grapevine, representing his present and future. A reminder, Aurelia explained, that life offers second chances to those with courage to seize them. Kaeso held the token, understanding its significance. Just as the original token had marked his transition from gladiator to freedman, this one symbolized another threshold, from employee to equal, from steward to partner in every sense. "The household is preparing for the Saturnalia feast," she continued. "Davos has opened the special vintage we set aside. Marcus has actually smiled twice today. Even Philos has abandoned his scrolls to join the celebration." Her eyes held his steadily. "Yet I find myself here instead." "Why?" Kaeso asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew the answer. "Perhaps for the same reason you are here rather than overseeing the preparations." Aurelia stepped closer, her voice softening. To remember where we began, to acknowledge how far we've come, to consider what might yet be possible. Between them hung all the words still unspoken, the gradual transformation. Of respect into admiration, of trust into affection, of professional partnership into something deeper that Roman society had no proper name for. A relationship that defied convention yet felt more authentic than any arranged political marriage. Kaeso closed his fingers around the wooden token, then reached for her hand. Against all protocol, against all social boundaries, she allowed her fingers to intertwine with his. The simple touch, impossible a year ago, now felt like the most natural thing in the world. No vows were exchanged, no formal declarations made. None were needed. Like the careful cultivation of vines, what grew between them had developed roots too deep to be easily uprooted by external judgment. Below them, Rome continued its eternal business. The Senate debated, merchants traded, society gossiped. But here, on this hillside, a widow and a gladiator had created something that transcended the city's rigid categories. Not by denying their pasts, but by writing their own future, one season at a time. The wedding knot would come later, in private, witnessed only by those who had stood by them through accusation and vindication. For now, this moment was enough. Standing together on the land they had reclaimed, bound not by convention but by choice, the morning sun illuminating a path forward that neither could have imagined when first they met.